Think about the last time everything felt like a struggle. Not one thing, everything. The job that drains you but won't let you go. The relationship that hurts but feels impossible to leave. The version of yourself you keep trying to become and keep failing to reach. The plans that collapse. The efforts that go unrewarded. The mornings that feel heavier than the night before. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a thought surfaces. Why is life doing this to me? Why does everything have to be this hard? Why does it feel like I'm swimming against a current that never stops? If you have ever felt this, you are not cursed. You are not unlucky. You are not being punished. You are simply caught in a war you started and don't know how to end. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this war better than almost any philosopher who ever lived. Not because he had an easy life. His was extraordinarily painful. But because he looked at his pain without flinching, without softening it, without asking the universe to apologize for it. And in doing so, he found something most people never find. Not peace as surrender, not acceptance as weakness, but a power so deep, so complete, that life itself stopped feeling like the enemy. Today we go deep into that discovery. Not surface-level positivity, not empty affirmations. The brutal, honest, transformative truth about why you are fighting life and how to stop. Stay until the end. The final lesson will reframe everything that came before it. 1. The war nobody told you that you declared. Here is the first uncomfortable truth. Life is not fighting you. You are fighting life. This distinction sounds simple. It is not. Because the war is invisible, fought entirely inside your own mind, in the gap between what is and what you believe should be. Nietzsche observed something profound about human suffering. Most of it, not all, but most, does not come from what happens to us. It comes from our resistance to what happens to us. The job loss is painful. The resistance to accepting it is suffering. The ended relationship hurts. The refusal to release it is prolonged agony. The failure stings. The story that the failure defines you, that is the wound that never heals. We are not trained to see this distinction. We are trained, by culture, by family, by every story we've ever been told, to believe that discomfort is an injustice. That struggle means something has gone wrong. That pain is a signal that life has made a mistake about us. And so we fight. We resist the reality in front of us. We argue with circumstances that do not hear our arguments. We exhaust ourselves pushing against walls that are not moving, and call it strength. Nietzsche would not call it strength. He would call it the most sophisticated form of self-destruction he ever witnessed. 2. The psychology of the eternal victim. This is the section that will be hardest to sit with, because it describes a pattern most of us have lived. Some of us are still living. Nietzsche introduced a concept he called resentment. It describes a specific psychological posture, one where a person, feeling powerless over their circumstances, turns that powerlessness into a moral identity. In other words, they make suffering their personality. You know this pattern. The person who has a story about why everything in their life has gone wrong, and the story always ends with someone else as the villain. The person who tries something once, fails, and decides the game is rigged. The person who is furious at successful people, not because those people did anything wrong, but because their success is a mirror that reflects too clearly. The person who speaks of their wounds constantly, not to heal them, but because without them, they don't know who they are. Nietzsche was not cruel about this. He was clear. This pattern is not weakness of character. It is the result of never being shown another way. But here is his brutal insistence. Understanding why you developed a pattern does not excuse you from the responsibility of changing it. Life will not stop fighting you simply because your wounds are real. Life does not negotiate with explanations. It responds only to action. 3. What Nietzsche meant by amor fati. Of all the ideas Nietzsche gave the world, this one is the most misunderstood and the most powerful. Amor fati, love of fate, not acceptance of fate, not tolerance of fate, not reluctant submission to fate. Love. Nietzsche did not mean pretend everything is fine. He did not mean suppress your pain and perform gratitude. He did not mean that the hard things in your life were secretly good all along. He meant something far more radical. He meant, what if you stopped needing your life to be different in order to engage fully with it? Most people operate on a conditional contract with their own existence. I will be happy when the circumstances change. I will engage fully when things feel safer. I will stop fighting when life gives me a reason to stop. Nietzsche looked at this contract and called it what it is, a postponement of life. The person waiting for the right conditions to start living is not resting. They are disappearing, day by day, year by year, in a waiting room of their own construction. Morfatti says, not later, now. Not when it gets easier, in the difficulty. Not when the pain stops, through it. This is not spiritual bypass. This is not toxic positivity. This is the recognition that the river doesn't stop for the rock. The question is only whether you will be the rock, rigid, resistant, slowly worn away, or the water, which flows around every obstacle and arrives at the ocean anyway. 4. The exhaustion of resistance. Let us be practical for a moment. Think about how much energy you spend fighting things you cannot change, fighting the personality of someone who will not change, fighting the outcome of a decision already made, fighting the reality of a relationship that has already ended, fighting the version of yourself you used to be, fighting the opinion of people who have already formed it, fighting the passage of time, fighting the fact that life is fundamentally uncertain. Calculate that energy. All the hours of mental replay, the conversations you rehearse with people who aren't in the room, the worst-case scenarios you construct in exquisite detail at 3 in the morning, the anger you carry about things that happened years ago, the grief you haven't let yourself finish. Now ask, what could you build with that energy? Nietzsche believed that the single greatest tragedy of the human condition is not suffering. It is misused energy, the will to power, the deepest drive in every person, being spent not on creation, not on growth, not on becoming, but on fighting the unchangeable. The person who stops fighting life does not become passive. They become ferocious, in an entirely different direction, toward the possible, toward the building, toward the self. 5. The difference between endurance and transformation. Here is where most philosophy gets it wrong, and where Nietzsche gets it right. Most teachings on acceptance stop at endurance. Bear it, tolerate it, get through it. Nietzsche was not interested in endurance. He was interested in transformation. The famous phrase he is most associated with, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," is not a motivational poster. It is a precise psychological claim. The claim is this: suffering, when moved through consciously and completely, does not just leave you intact. It changes the structure of who you are. It builds capacities that comfort never could. Patience that only existed in theory becomes real because you had no choice but to practice it. Compassion that was intellectual becomes felt because you have known pain. Courage that was performed becomes genuine because you have walked into fear and come out the other side. The person who fights their suffering stays the same size. The person who moves through it grows into something the suffering could not break. But, and this is critical, this only happens when you stop fighting the experience and start engaging with it. You cannot transform what you are busy denying. You cannot integrate what you spend all your energy resisting. The wound you refuse to look at cannot heal. The fear you refuse to face cannot shrink. The chapter you refuse to close cannot become the foundation of the next one. 6. Why your greatest enemy is the story you tell yourself. Nietzsche was a philosopher who took language extraordinarily seriously, because he understood that the stories we use to describe our lives are not neutral observations. They are instructions. The story you tell about who you are determines who you become. The story you tell about why your life is hard determines whether it stays hard. The story you tell about what is possible for you determines what you attempt. And most people are telling themselves stories written in a moment of pain and have never gone back to edit them. I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at things. Written after a failure at 22, carried at 45. people always leave. Written after one catastrophic abandonment. Applied to everyone since. I don't deserve the things I want. Written in childhood. Never questioned. Never challenged. These stories are not the truth. They are scar tissue mistaken for bone. Nietzsche's philosophy demands one thing above all else: the willingness to examine everything you believe and ask the ruthless question. Is this true, or is this just familiar? Familiarity is not truth. Comfort is not accuracy. And the story you've been telling longest is not necessarily the one that deserves to continue. 7. The moment life stops fighting back. So when does it happen? When does life stop feeling like a war? Not when the circumstances become easy. Some of the most peaceful people alive are living through extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And some of the most tortured people alive are living lives that look, from the outside, completely comfortable. It happens in a specific internal moment. The moment you stop requiring life to be different before you engage with it fully. The moment you stop outsourcing your peace to circumstances beyond your control. The moment you accept, not as defeat, but as liberation, that this is the life you have, not the one you planned, not the one you deserved, not the one that seems fair. This one. And from this one, only from this one, something can actually be built. Nietzsche described this as the great health, not the absence of struggle, but the capacity to struggle without being consumed by it. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to feel pain without making it your identity. Not the absence of failure, but the transformation of failure into fuel. This is not a destination, it is a practice. Chosen, daily. In the small moments when resistance rises and you choose engagement instead. 8. How to stop fighting. 7 practices. Not theory, architecture. Practice 1. Identify your current wars. Write them down. Every person, circumstance, outcome, past event that you are actively resisting. Name the war before you can end it. Most people are fighting battles they've never consciously acknowledged. Practice 2. Distinguish between what can change and what cannot. This is Nietzsche's most practical gift. For what can change, act. Immediately, specifically, consistently. For what cannot, release. Not once. Every time the resistance rises, release again. Practice 3. Stop rehearsing the past. Every moment spent replaying what should have happened is a moment stolen from what still can. The past is the only thing in the universe that is completely, permanently finished. Treat it accordingly. Practice 4. Rewrite one story. Not all of them. One. The one that has limited you longest. Ask, what would my life look like if this story wasn't true? Then live as if that question has an answer worth finding. Practice 5. Move toward discomfort deliberately. This is the counterintuitive key. The person who only moves toward comfort becomes increasingly fragile. Every deliberate step into discomfort, a hard conversation, a scary beginning, an honest self-examination, reduces the power discomfort has over you. You stop fighting life when you stop fearing it. You stop fearing it when you have evidence, from your own experience, that you can survive it. Practice 6. Build something. Nietzsche was insistent on this. The antidote to meaningless suffering is meaningful creation. It doesn't need to be large. A skill developed, a relationship deepened, a discipline maintained. The act of building something redirects the will to power from resistance toward expression, and in that redirection, the war quietly ends. Practice 7. Choose your response before the moment arrives. Most people make their most important decisions in their worst moments. Decide in advance who you will be when difficulty arrives. Not the reaction that comes automatically, the response you have chosen. This single practice, repeated enough, becomes character. And character, as Nietzsche saw it, is the only real form of destiny. 9. The final truth. Nietzsche wrote, and I want you to sit with these words, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati. That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not nothing to be different because everything is perfect, but nothing to be different because you have accepted, fully and finally, that this, exactly this, is the raw material of your life. And raw material is not the finished thing. Raw material is the beginning. The people who stop fighting life are not the ones who suffered less. They are the ones who decided, at some specific moment, that their energy was too precious to spend on a war they could not win, and redirected it toward building, toward becoming, toward the one project that Nietzsche believed was the only one truly worth a human life. The project of becoming, completely and unapologetically, yourself. Not the self that circumstances tried to make you. Not the self that fear built while you weren't watching. The self that emerges when you stop fighting and start creating. That self does not fight life, and life, finally, quietly, completely, stops fighting back. People who fight life stay the same. People who embrace it become something it cannot break. The war ends the moment you stop declaring it. Start today. If something in this video reached you, if it named something you've been carrying, without words, then you are already closer to the end of the war than you think. If you want more content on Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, the psychology of resilience and self-mastery, the hidden mechanics of human suffering and transformation, and the brutal truths that lead to genuine freedom, subscribe now. Because the most important battle you will ever fight is the one you choose to stop.